really mean, so we're not really upset about it. But during that divorce, he had a few pieces of property. And my mom had just bought a brand new Cadillac. But she didn't want to drive it. So my uncle had a 1972 Dodge Colt. And the thing had been beat, I would say, to hell and back, but I am not the traditional Church of God, so I won't say that. But there was not a fender, a door, or anything that was not beat on that car. It didn't have no bumpers, and it didn't have no back seat, because he was reupholstering the back seat and he had removed the bumpers. And my mom told him, says, Ross, I'll buy that car from you. And he said, June, I'll sell that car to you. And so she bought it, much to her children's dismay, because it was very ugly. But she was so proud of that little car. She sent it off to the body shop and she told him, she said, take all the dings out of it. The man said, dings? He said, these aren't dings, these are craters. And so she said, I wanted it painted champagne. Can you say that with me? Champagne. One more time, because that sounded good. Champagne. Well, that's not what she got. What she got was school bus yellow. Can you say that with me? School bus yellow. It don't have the same ring as champagne. So we went around the corner. My mom got there and she said, where's my car? He said, well, we haven't finished putting it back together yet. We still don't have the bumpers on it. He said, but it's painted. He said, it's right around the corner. So we went around the corner and there it was. All it needed was public school system painted on the side of it. She said, oh heavens, no, y'all made a mistake. He said, no, we haven't. This is the color you picked. She said, y'all have bumped your head. She said, I'm taking my car. And she said, now I want you to give me what little bit of paint's left. So they gave her the bucket that it came in. They had just finished painting 3 other school buses. And on the way home, we stopped at a Sherman-Williams paint store. And she bought a little can of black lacquer paint and some sponge rollers. And we got back to the house, and I was due to be in the recording studio in a little while, and she told me, she says, David, you mix this paint with this paint. And so I did. I mixed the black with the yellow, and it turned out booger green. And I thought, well, this is quite ugly. But I took that paint out there and I took those rollers and I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with it. So I painted it up one side, right down the middle, and I started painting one side of it. Got the whole side painted, and it started to lightly rain. Well, the paint didn't run, it stayed. The problem was the car looked like a lemon lime. Half School bus yellow and half booger green. And my mom gets in it to drive it, and one of her friends calls her when she gets back to the house and says, June, how many cars you got? She said, what do you mean? She said, well, when you left the house, you left in a yellow one. When you came back in a green one. She said, honey, that's how you know when you've gotten up in this world is when you can afford that many cars. So, my mom had to go to the doctor's one day, and the car still had not been painted properly, and still didn't have the bumpers on it, still didn't have a back seat. Now, let me interject this little point to y'all. Us kids had to sit in the back, and it was hot, because you had the muffler under there, you had the axle under there, and we looked like a bunch of little weebles in the back. We just bouncing. We had to stand on our feet while we were riding, and it was so hot that the bottom of our shoes started to melt. But she drove that little car. So we're on the way to the doctor's one day, and she decides to get to a stop sign, and she doesn't fully stop, mainly because the car probably didn't have enough brakes to stop. So she did a rolling stop, and here comes a cop. And he says, ma'am, he says, I'm going to have to write you 2 tickets. One for rolling through the stop sign, and one for not having safe equipment on the car. She said, what are you talking about, no safe equipment? He says, you don't have no bumpers. She said, yes, I do. They're right here in the back seat. So we go to court. And Judge Shutter, I'll never forget, said, if anybody, and he didn't know my mom's story yet, he said, if there's anybody here who can give me a story that I've never heard before, he said, I'm going to throw their case out. And I'm going to wish them a happy day. So he called my mom up there. But let me regress a little bit. The cop said to my mom, he says, ma'am, he said, what color is this car? And she said, 2-tone. And so the cop put a big question mark where it says color of vehicle. Big question mark. So we get to court, and the judge is looking at the tickets. He says, ma'am, he says, how do you plead to this? She says, very gently. He says, guilty or not guilty? She said, I'm surely not guilty. She said, but let's talk about it. So he said, I've got 2 tickets here, one for no bumpers. She said, that's a lie. She said, I've got the bumpers. He said, okay. He says, now, by the way, he says, what is this question mark here for color of car? What color is the car, ma'am? And she said, it's 2-tone. He says, 2-tone? He said, what do you mean 2-tone? She says, well, it's 2-tone. He said, well, what color is it? She said, which direction you going? He said, excuse me? She said, well, if you're going east, it's green. If you're going west, it's yellow. He said, ma'am, you can't be telling me the truth. She said, I'm telling you the truth. He said, I've got to see this. So he comes down off the bench, and he opens up the door on the side, and there it was, sitting there. He comes back to the bench, and he says, now you see, this is what I was telling you. If you can tell me a story I've never heard before, I'll let you go. Needless to say, he wished my mom a fond farewell. And that's the truth, y'all. My hand up. Hand up. But what was really something is when we were going down the road, and the muffler would fall off. And she'd send one of us kids out to retrieve it. And we would just slide up under the car and put it back up and I'll move it again. And this was embarrassing. This stunt might go. But I'm telling